The moment I heard those words echo through the courtroom, I knew my life was about to change forever. My ex-husband, Quentin, stood there in his expensive suit, looking directly at Judge Torres with complete confidence as he delivered what he thought would be the final blow. Your Honor, Phoenix doesn't even have what anyone would call a real job. She's unfit to be a mother. I felt my heart stop. 4 years of rebuilding our lives, 4 years of making every sacrifice to give my daughter Zara everything she needed, and it was all being reduced to this single, devastating moment. The judge's pen hovered over her notepad, and I could see the doubt creeping into her expression. This was it. This was how I was going to lose my daughter. But then something extraordinary happened, something I never could have prepared for, even though I should have known Zara better than anyone else in that room. My 10-year-old daughter, who had been sitting quietly in the gallery with her worn composition notebook pressed against her chest, suddenly stood up, not dramatically, not with tears or anger, but with the kind of calm determination that had always amazed me about her. The same look she got when she was solving impossible math problems or teaching herself a new language from library books. Your Honor, she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a bell. May I please correct something my father said? The entire courtroom went silent. Judge Torres looked surprised, but curious. Quentin's confident smirk began to falter. His expensive attorney shifted uncomfortably in his chair, and I held my breath, not knowing what my brilliant, observant daughter was about to do, but trusting her completely. Zara walked toward the bench with that notebook clutched in her small hands, and I realized she had been preparing for this moment in ways I never imagined. While I had been drowning in legal paperwork and fear, my daughter had been quietly building her own case, not with lawyers or depositions, but with something far more powerful, the truth. Let me tell you about the 3 people who shaped this story. There's me, Phoenix, a 33-year-old single mother who built an unconventional life around being present for my daughter while still supporting us both. I host the overnight jazz show on our local radio station, run a food truck called Midnight Munchies for late-night workers and college students, and do voiceover work for commercials and cartoons from our basement studio. Then there's Zara, my 10-year-old daughter who speaks 3 languages, collects vintage postcards from 47 different countries, and notices absolutely everything. She's the kind of child who listens to adult conversations and remembers details that even the adults forget. She's quiet, but when she speaks, people listen. And finally, there's Quentin, my ex-husband who walked out on us when Zara was 6 years old, claiming he needed someone more ambitious and traditional. He's a pharmaceutical sales executive who makes 6 figures, drives a BMW, and recently married Bethany, a corporate executive with family money. After 2 years of barely seeing Zara, he suddenly decided he wanted custody, convinced that his suburban mansion and conventional lifestyle made him the better parent. What happened next in that courtroom would challenge everything the judge thought she knew about what makes a good mother, what constitutes a real job, and what kind of parent truly prepares a child for the world ahead. Because sometimes the most important testimony doesn't come from expert witnesses or character references. Sometimes it comes from a 10-year-old girl with a notebook full of observations and the courage to stand up for the parent who taught her that helping people in the dark hours of night is just as valuable as any 9-to-5 job. To understand how I ended up in that courtroom fighting for my daughter, you need to know how we got here. 4 years ago, I thought I had everything figured out. I was married to Quentin, living in his idea of the perfect suburban life, trying to be the traditional wife he wanted. But that version of me felt like wearing clothes that didn't fit. I was suffocating in dinner parties where I smiled politely while pharmaceutical executives discussed profit margins, pretending to care about country club memberships and neighborhood gossip about lawn care. The cracks in our marriage started showing when Zara was born. Quentin wanted a wife who would organize charity galas and host business dinners, but I wanted to be present for every moment of our daughter's life. When she took her first steps, I was there. When she spoke her first word, which was music instead of mama or dada, I was the one who heard it. Quentin was always at another conference, another client dinner, another networking event that was supposedly building our future. The breaking point came when Zara was 6. She'd spent the entire day creating an elaborate art project for Father's Day, using construction paper, glitter, and her own tiny handprints to make a card that said, "Daddy, you're my hero." She waited by the window for 3 hours for Quentin to come home. He finally walked in at 11 p.m., barely glanced at her masterpiece, and told her he was too tired to look at it properly. I watched my daughter's face crumble, and something inside me broke too. 2 weeks later, Quentin sat me down and delivered the speech I should have seen coming. "Phoenix, this isn't working. You're not the partner I need. You're too focused on being artsy and unconventional. I need someone who understands my career, someone who can help me build the life I'm working toward. We want different things." What he really meant was that he had already found someone else. Bethany worked for one of his biggest pharmaceutical clients, came from old money, and knew how to navigate corporate social circles without questioning whether any of it mattered. She was everything I wasn't, and everything he thought he wanted. The divorce was swift and brutal. Quentin kept the house, the cars, and most of our savings. I got Zara and a determination to prove that love mattered more than money. We moved into a small townhouse across town, and I had to rebuild everything from scratch. That's when I discovered who I really was. Instead of trying to fit into someone else's definition of success, I created my own. The overnight radio show at WKJZ happened by accident. I was at the station dropping off voiceover work when their regular midnight DJ called in sick. The station manager heard my voice and asked if I could fill in. Something magical happened during those quiet hours between 2 and 6 a.m. I connected with night shift workers, insomniacs, college students cramming for exams, and people going through difficult times who needed someone to talk to in the darkness. The food truck idea came from listening to my radio callers. So many of them worked irregular hours and struggled to find decent food late at night. I used the small settlement from my divorce to buy an old food truck, painted Midnight Munchies on the side, and started serving fresh, affordable meals to the people others forgot about. Hospital staff getting off 12-hour shifts, security guards, taxi drivers, students who couldn't afford campus food prices. The voiceover work grew naturally from there. My radio voice caught the attention of local advertising agencies, and soon I was doing commercials, cartoons, and even some work for educational videos. I converted our basement into a professional recording studio, and Zara would do her homework at the kitchen table above while I brought animated characters to life below. Our life wasn't conventional, but it was ours. Zara learned Spanish by helping me practice commercial scripts. She picked up Japanese from anime voice work I did for a local distributor. Her French improved because I had regular callers from Montreal who listened to our station online. While other kids were shuttled between after-school programs and babysitters, Zara was with me, learning about the world through the diverse people who called into the show. We had routines that worked for us. I'd get home from the radio station at 7 a.m., just as Zara was waking up for school. We'd have breakfast together. I'd walk her to the bus stop, then sleep until she got home at 3. Evenings were ours completely. Homework, dinner, reading time, and long conversations about everything from why stars twinkle to how radio waves travel through space. I thought we had found our rhythm. I thought we were safe in the life we had built together. I never imagined that Quentin, who had barely seen Zara in 2 years, would suddenly decide that our unconventional happiness was somehow dangerous to our daughter's future. But that's exactly what happened when he filed for full custody. The custody papers arrived on a Tuesday morning in March, delivered by a process server who looked apologetic as he handed me the thick envelope. My hands shook as I read Quentin's petition for full custody of Zara. The language was cold and clinical, describing me as an unfit parent who provided an unstable environment for our daughter. According to the documents, my erratic work schedule and inconsistent income made me incapable of proper parenting. What hurt most was reading Quentin's sworn statement. He painted a picture of our life that was completely unrecognizable to me. He called our townhouse substandard housing and described my work as operating an unlicensed food service and working antisocial hours that neglect the child's need for routine. He claimed Zara was frequently left unsupervised and lacks proper academic guidance. Every sentence felt like a knife twisting deeper. The worst part was that I could see how it might sound to someone who didn't know us. a mother who worked until 6 a.m., sold food from a truck, and recorded voices in her basement could easily be portrayed as unstable. Quentin was betting that a judge would see his corporate salary, suburban mansion, and stay-at-home wife as obviously superior to our unconventional life. I hired the only attorney I could afford, Maria Santos, a public defender who handled family cases on the side. She was overworked and underpaid, but she was honest with me from the start. "Phoenix, I'm going to be straight with you. Quentin has resources we don't. He's hired Carmichael and Associates, the most expensive family law firm in the state. They're going to make this about stability versus chaos, and judges tend to favor traditional family structures." The months leading up to the hearing were torture. Every interaction with Zara felt weighted with the possibility that it might be one of our last normal moments together. I tried to keep our routines the same, but I could see her watching me with worried eyes. She was too smart not to notice the legal papers scattered across our kitchen table and the hushed phone calls with my attorney. Quentin's strategy became clear through the discovery process. His lawyers had been documenting everything. They had photos of our townhouse from the street, showing peeling paint on the front steps I hadn't had time to fix. They had records of every late payment on my student loans from when I was between voiceover gigs. They even had statements from neighbors describing the unusual hours when I left for work. But the most damaging evidence was financial. Quentin's tax returns showed consistent six-figure income for the past 5 years. Mine showed the irregular earnings of a freelancer. Some months I made good money when commercial work was steady. Other months, when the radio station cut my hours or the food truck needed repairs, our income dropped dangerously low. On paper, it looked like I couldn't provide basic security for my daughter. The character assassination began 3 weeks before the hearing. Quentin's attorneys interviewed everyone from Zara's school principal to our pediatrician, asking leading questions about my parenting. Did they think Zara's unusual cultural knowledge suggested inappropriate exposure to adult situations? Were they concerned about her unconventional home environment? Had they noticed signs of neglect or instability? Most people defended me, but their statements got twisted. When Zara's teacher mentioned that she sometimes seemed tired in class, it became evidence of inadequate sleep routines. When our doctor noted that Zara was emotionally mature for her age, it was characterized as being forced to grow up too quickly. Every positive aspect of our life together was reframed as a potential problem. The final blow came 2 days before the hearing when Quentin's team filed additional testimony from Bethany. She presented herself as the perfect stepmother, describing her plans to enroll Zara in proper after-school programs, provide tutoring for academic improvement, and ensure age-appropriate activities with children from stable families. She painted a picture of suburban perfection that made our bohemian townhouse life look like dangerous negligence. I barely slept the night before court. I kept thinking about how Quentin would present himself as the responsible parent who had finally stepped up to save his daughter from her mother's poor choices. He had the money, the lawyers, and the conventional lifestyle that family courts historically favored. All I had was love and the hope that it would somehow be enough. Walking into that courthouse felt like walking into battle completely unarmed. The marble floors echoed with the sound of expensive shoes and confident voices. Lawyers in $1,000 suits carried briefcases full of evidence designed to destroy everything I had built with Zara. I looked across the courtroom at Quentin, sitting straight-backed and confident next to his legal team. He looked like success, like stability, like everything a judge would want in a custodial parent. For the first time since this nightmare began, I truly believed I was going to lose my daughter. The night before the custody hearing, I found Zara sitting at our kitchen table with her composition notebook open, writing by the light of our old brass lamp. She'd been working on something for weeks, always closing the notebook when I walked by, always giving me that mysterious smile that meant she was planning something important. I had learned not to push her when she got that look. Zara processed the world differently than other kids, and I had always respected her need for space to think things through. "Mom," she said without looking up from her writing, "I want to come to court tomorrow." My heart clenched. I had been dreading this conversation. "Sweetheart, courtrooms aren't really places for kids. It might be boring, and some of the things people say might be upsetting." She finally looked up at me. and I saw something in her 10-year-old eyes that took my breath away. It was the same fierce determination she had shown when she decided to teach herself Japanese at age 8, or when she spent 3 months learning to play violin from YouTube videos because we couldn't afford lessons. When Zara made up her mind about something, she became unstoppable. "I know what Dad's going to say about us," she said quietly. "I've been listening to your phone calls with Mrs. Santos. I know he thinks our life is wrong." She held up her notebook. "But I've been writing down what our life is really like, the true parts that he doesn't see." I sat down beside her, feeling the weight of everything we were facing. For months, I had been trying to protect her from the ugliness of the custody battle, but Zara was too perceptive to be shielded from reality. She had been watching me stay up late reviewing legal documents, had seen me crying after difficult phone calls with my attorney, had noticed how I jumped every time the phone rang. "What kind of things have you been writing?" I asked gently. She flipped through pages covered in her careful handwriting. "Like how you help Mr. Rodriguez, who calls the radio show every night because he can't sleep after his wife died, and how you gave Mrs. Kim free food from the truck for 2 weeks when her husband was in the hospital, and how you taught me Spanish while practicing your commercial about that car dealership." I realized then that while I had been consumed with legal strategies and financial documents, Zara had been conducting her own kind of research. She had been documenting our life not as Quentin's lawyers saw it, but as she lived it every single day. "You don't have to do this, baby," I told her. "This fight is between the adults. You shouldn't have to defend our family." "But it's my family too," she said with startling clarity. "And if Dad is going to tell lies about you, then someone should tell the truth." That's when I understood that this custody battle had changed my daughter in ways I hadn't fully grasped. She wasn't just watching from the sidelines anymore. She had become an active participant in protecting what we had built together. The maturity I had always admired in her had crystallized into something fiercer, something protective. And I made a decision that went against every parental instinct I had. Instead of shielding Zara from the courtroom drama, I chose to trust her judgment. If she felt ready to face this battle alongside me, then I would respect that strength. "Okay," I said, "if you really want to be there, you can come. But you need to understand that your father's lawyers are going to say difficult things about me, about us, things that might hurt to hear." She nodded solemnly. "I know. That's why I need to be there." The morning of the hearing, Zara dressed herself in her best outfit, a navy blue dress that she had chosen for last year's school awards ceremony, paired with the small pearl earrings my mother had given her. She carried her composition notebook like a shield, holding it close to her chest as we walked up the courthouse steps. In the elevator, she looked up at me and said something that nearly broke my heart. "Mom, whatever happens today, I want you to know that you're the best mother in the world. Not because you're perfect, but because you see me." I squeezed her hand, feeling the solid weight of that notebook between us. "Zara, no matter what anyone says in there, remember that love isn't measured by bank accounts or house sizes. It's measured by showing up day after day for the people who matter most." As we walked into the courtroom, I had no idea that my daughter's careful observations and quiet determination were about to change everything. I thought I was bringing her to witness a legal proceeding. I didn't realize she was carrying the most powerful evidence we could possibly have, the unvarnished truth about what it means to be a family. The moment Quentin finished his devastating testimony, the courtroom felt like a tomb. His words hung in the air like poison. "She doesn't even have what anyone would call a real job. She's unfit to be a mother." Judge Torres was writing notes, her expression unreadable, and I could feel my world collapsing around me. 4 years of fighting to build something meaningful with Zara, and it was all being reduced to this single, crushing judgment. That's when I heard the scrape of a chair against the courtroom floor. I turned to see Zara standing up in the gallery, her composition notebook pressed against her chest like armor. She wasn't crying or angry. She looked calm, almost serene, but there was steel in her posture that I had never seen before. Every eye in the courtroom turned toward this small girl in her navy blue dress, standing with the kind of quiet confidence that commanded attention. "Excuse me, Your Honor," Zara said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent room. May I please correct something my father said? Judge Torres looked genuinely surprised. In all my research about family court, I'd never read about a child requesting to speak during custody proceedings. The judge leaned forward, studying Zara's face with curiosity rather than annoyance. "Young lady, this is highly unusual," Judge Torres said. "What's your name?" "Zara Henderson, Your Honor. I'm 10 years old, and I'm the reason everyone is here today." She paused, glancing at me with a look that asked for permission. I gave her the slightest nod, my heart pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. "I'd like to hear what you have to say," Judge Torres said. "Please approach the bench, but remember, you're under oath just like everyone else." Zara walked forward with measured steps, opening her notebook as she moved. Quentin's face had gone pale, and his attorney was whispering urgently in his ear. But Zara seemed oblivious to their panic. She stopped in front of the judge's bench and looked up with those intelligent eyes that had always amazed me. "Your Honor, my father says my mother doesn't have a real job, but I've been keeping track of what she actually does, and I think he's wrong." She opened her notebook to a page covered in neat columns and careful handwriting. "My mom has 3 jobs. First, she hosts the midnight radio show on WKJZ from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m., Monday through Friday. She talks to people who work night shifts at the hospital, truck drivers who get lonely on long hauls, and college students who are scared about exams. Last month, a man named Carlos called to say that talking to my mom helped him not feel so sad after his brother died." The courtroom was completely silent. Even Quentin's expensive attorneys had stopped shuffling papers. "Her second job is running the Midnight Munchies food truck. She makes fresh food for people who work when everyone else is sleeping. She gives free meals to homeless people, and she helped Mrs. Patterson from my school when her husband was in the hospital and she couldn't afford groceries." Zara flipped to another page. "I wrote down all the people she's helped. There are 43 names." Judge Torres was leaning forward now, her pen forgotten. "Go on, Zara." "Her third job is voiceover work. She does commercials and cartoons from our basement studio. She taught me Spanish by practicing her scripts with me. She learned Japanese for an anime project, and now we both speak it. She does the voice of Princess Luna in the Starlight Adventures cartoon that kids watch on Saturday mornings." Zara's voice grew stronger, more confident. "My father says she works weird hours, but she works when people need help the most. While he sleeps, she's helping lonely people feel less alone, feeding people who are hungry and making children laugh. She doesn't work backwards. She works when the world needs her most." I watched Quentin's confident expression crumble as our daughter continued. "He says I don't have proper supervision, but my mom is with me every single day when I get home from school. She helps with my homework, reads to me every night, and comes to every school event even when she's tired from working all night. She taught me that helping people matters more than making lots of money." Zara closed her notebook and looked directly at Judge Torres. "My father has a big house and makes lots of money, but he didn't know I learned 3 languages until I told him in the hallway today. He didn't know I won the science fair, or that I can play violin, or that I want to be an astronomer when I grow up. My mom knows everything about me because she pays attention." The silence that followed was deafening. Judge Torres stared at Zara for what felt like an eternity, then looked at Quentin, whose face had gone ashen. "Mr. Henderson," the judge said slowly, "your daughter has just given the most compelling testimony I've heard in 23 years on this bench. She's demonstrated exactly what kind of parent raises a child with this level of wisdom, compassion, and courage." Judge Torres set down her pen and looked directly at Quentin, her expression stern but not unkind. "Mr. Henderson, in my 23 years on this bench, I have never heard testimony quite like your daughter's. She has just demonstrated something that all your financial documents and character witnesses failed to show: the difference between providing for a child and truly knowing a child." The judge's words cut through the courtroom like a blade. What I've witnessed today is a 10-year-old girl who speaks multiple languages, understands the value of helping others, and possesses the kind of emotional intelligence that doesn't develop in chaos. It develops under the guidance of a parent who teaches by example, who shows up consistently, and who raises a child to see beyond herself. She turned her attention to me, and for the first time all day, I saw something that looked like warmth in her eyes. "Miss Henderson, your work schedule may be unconventional, but your daughter's testimony reveals something remarkable. You've raised a child who understands that meaningful work isn't defined by office hours or salary figures. She's learned that contribution to society comes in many forms, and that helping people during their most vulnerable hours is actually quite noble." Judge Torres picked up her gavel, and my heart stopped. "Therefore, I award primary physical custody to Phoenix Henderson, with standard visitation rights to the father." The sound of that gavel hitting the bench was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. Quentin's face went through a series of emotions: shock, anger, and finally something that might have been shame. His expensive attorneys began packing their briefcases with sharp, efficient movements, their defeat absolute. Bethany, who had been sitting behind him in her designer suit, looked like she had swallowed something bitter. But I only had eyes for Zara, who walked calmly back to me with that same serene expression she had worn throughout her testimony. When she reached my arms, I held her so tight I was afraid I might hurt her, but she just hugged me back with equal fierceness. "How did you know?" I whispered into her hair. "How did you know exactly what to say?" She pulled back to look at me, and I saw tears in her eyes for the first time that day. "Because I've been watching you my whole life, Mom. I know who you really are." The months that followed brought changes I hadn't expected. Quentin began exercising his court-ordered visitation rights, taking Zara every other weekend to his suburban mansion. But something had shifted in their relationship. During their first visit, Zara told me later, she had asked him about his work, really asked the way she asked me about mine. She wanted to know if he liked helping people, if his job made him feel good about himself, if he thought about the patients who used the medications he sold. He didn't know how to answer, she told me one Sunday evening when I picked her up. I think maybe nobody ever asked him that before. More surprisingly, Quentin began paying child support without the court having to enforce it. Not just the minimum amount ordered by the judge, but enough to make a real difference in our lives. I was able to cut back on some of my food truck hours and spend more time on voiceover work, which paid better and let me be home when Zara got out of school. 6 months after the hearing, Quentin called me directly instead of going through lawyers. "Phoenix," he said, and his voice sounded different somehow, less polished and more human. "I want to apologize, not just for the custody battle, but for everything. For not seeing what you were building with Zara. For not understanding that being present matters more than being financially successful." I accepted his apology because holding on to anger would have poisoned the peace we had finally found. Besides, Zara was watching how I handled conflict, just like she watched everything else, and I wanted her to see forgiveness in action. Today, a year later, our life looks much the same as it did before the custody battle, but it feels completely different. Zara still helps me practice commercial scripts in Spanish, still falls asleep to the sound of my voice coming through the radio in her bedroom, still occasionally comes with me to the food truck on weekends. But now there's a deeper understanding between us about what we've built together and why it matters. The composition notebook where Zara documented our life sits on our kitchen table now, a reminder that love shows up in midnight radio conversations, in free meals for struggling families, and in bedtime stories read by exhausted parents who never miss a night. Sometimes the most powerful testimony doesn't come from expert witnesses or financial statements. Sometimes it comes from a child who has been paying attention all along. Our story proves that family isn't defined by conventional success or traditional schedules. It's defined by showing up, by being present, and by raising children who understand that the most important job anyone can have is making the world a little less lonely, one person at a time. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below telling me about the unconventional heroes in your own life. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories about real families facing real challenges with courage and love.